this will be my first needle knitting tutorial. I learned first to loom knit if you haven't seen any of my other videos, and I will leave my loom knit videos up on my YouTube channel. But since I am a novice knitter, I've been knitting, I don't know, 2 or 3 months now maybe, I thought it would be interesting to have a tutorial taught by someone who was actually a beginner knitter. So it won't be perfect, but hopefully it will help you if you want to learn to knit or if you want to switch from loom knitting to needle knitting. So this is what I originally termed my cozy 2-hour beanie that I made on the loom. I think experienced knitters could probably make this in 2 hours easily, maybe even less. Beginners, it may take you a lot longer, so I'm just going to call it a cozy chemo beanie. I am going to make this with acrylic yarn, and the reason why I use acrylic yarn is because I donate all my chemo hats, and many people are allergic to wool and even alpaca, plus most of that is cost prohibitive for me, for my budget when I'm donating hats. Without further ado, we will get started. I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I will show you all the items I will be using for this particular hat. This is what we will be making. Okay, and this is my cozy beanie. You can make the brim wider if you wish, and I usually make mine wider, but this was some scrap yarn I had left over, and this was about all I had. So it just depends on how wide you want to make your brim. And my head is 23 inches, or I think 59 centimeters, and it fits my head pretty well. So this is my cozy beanie. It's nice and snug, but it's not too tight. And I think it just has a really nice fit to it. And you can choose to cast on more stitches. This is 40 stitches casted on. And I think it's just right for me and for chemo patients. But if you did want to make it bigger, you could cast on 48 stitches. I did one in 48 stitches, and it was just way too big for me. All right, so what the needles that I'm currently using are the Clover Bamboo, and these are number 13, 9mm, 16 inches, or 41 centimeters. These are the ones right here. I started out using these because they grip the yarn a little bit better, and I think for beginners, these are the way to go. Also, they are readily available at Joann's and probably some other big box stores. Michael's carries these, but their selection or their inventory at my particular store is not very big, so I do better going to Joann's. When I get to the top and get ready to bind off, I'm going to use number 11 double pointed needles. These are called DPNs. I'm also using the Clovers, and I'm going to go down one size because it just makes it a little bit easier. I bought these ChowGoo stitch markers. These are all different sizes because depending on the size of your needle, you'll need a different size. You don't have to use anything fancy like this. You can actually just use a piece of scrap yarn. Also, I have these nifty little stoppers. I'm sure there's probably a technical name for them, but when you're ready to put your work down, it holds your work so that your stitches don't slide off the ends. And there are all different sizes for different needles. So when you buy them, you need to make sure you're buying the right size of stoppers for the needles that you have, because when I first started buying these, I didn't realize that, and the ones I have are good for my 10s and my 11s, but they don't fit the 13s, so you need the bigger ones. And those are available at Joann's as well, and I think Michael's. All right, so the yarn that I'm going to use, I'm going to use this blue, but it is Lion Brand, Hometown USA. This is readily available here in the States, and it is a number 6 bulk, super bulky yarn. Recommended needle size on this one, see, right here is 13. So that's the size, or 9mm, and that's the size I'm going to use. Along with that, that's my brim yarn. I love this country loom. It's a lot, this is not at all like Lion Brand homespun. So for those of you that are going, oh, I can't stand homespun because it's just a booger to work with, this is totally different. It's a lot thicker. It's not silky, and it doesn't fray like the homespun has a tendency to. Okay, so this is, I get this at Michael's, and this is, let me see on here. Oh, here we go. This is also a number 6 bulky, and on this one is a US 13. So it works really well because these are the same size yarns, but they're very different. So I'm using the blue for the brim, and then I'm using this country loom that has this really really pretty light blue color in it. And it's funny because this is Lion Brand and this is Loops and Threads, country loom from Michael's. But for whatever reason, I always find it really easy to match the Hometown USA to the country loom. So I don't know why it works, but it just does. So we're now going to learn how to cast on, and I'm going to use this blue so hopefully you can be able to see it better. All right, so we're going to get our circular needles here, okay? And to figure out how much yarn you need to cast on, I'll show you a little trick. So we're going to do I'm going to teach you the Longtail Cast on. And this is the one that I found the easiest after watching, I don't even know how many YouTube videos on learning how to knit. So I'm going to wrap it here one time, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now a lot of people will tell you to wrap 10, and then you're going to count that 4 times for your 40 stitches. I know that that's too long for me personally, but until you know what your knitting tension is going to be, go ahead and wrap 10. I'm going to wrap 7, and I'm going to do that, so that would be, and I'm going to pretend like that's 10. That'd be 20. Then I'm going to grab this for 30. And then one more time would be 40. So basically I measured 10 stitches, and then I just pulled out 4 lengths of 10, making 40, okay? All right, so this is my tail of yarn that I'm going to use for my cast on. This end goes to my working yarn, okay? What I'm going to do is you can put a slip knot in here if you want. I don't, because I don't like knots in the bottom of on the edge of my hats that I have to take out later. Okay, so here's my tail, here's my working yarn. I'm going to take these 2 fingers and put them like this. And all I'm going to do is grab this yarn with these fingers and grab this yarn like this. So I'm just holding these 2 tails of yarn, and I'm going to pull it back like it's a slingshot, okay? So see how that makes like a slingshot method, all right? Or it makes, this is kind of also called the slingshot method. All right, so I'm going under my thumb, okay, over to the one that's on my finger. All right, now I have those 2 on there. I'm going to come back through my thumb, and I'm going to let go, and now I have 2 stitches on my needle. Okay, we'll do that again. All right, fingers here, grab the 2 pieces of yarn here, pull it back. Oh, also down in the very corner down here of your YouTube video is a little wheel, and you can choose speed, and you can slow this down even more, okay? All right, so here's my needle going under the loop that's on my thumb, over to the one on my finger, back through my thumb, and then let your thumb, let that pop off, and then tighten it up. Don't pull it super, super tight, because you'll never be able to get your stitches in here, okay? So you can rewind this and use that little speed wheel right down here in the corner, in the right-hand corner. All right, so now I have 3 stitches on here. Again, under the thumb, around finger, back through the thumb, and let your thumb go, and then tighten it up, okay? You can rewind that as many times as you like. So I have 4 stitches on my needle, and I'm going to cast on 40 stitches. So I'm going to do it in real time right here, and you can slow this down, okay? And as you go, you're going to have to move your stitches down, and that's fine. So just keep, tighten it up a little bit, but don't tighten it up a whole bunch, okay? So you want it to kind of look like that. Don't tighten it up a whole bunch, but I don't like my stitches really loose either. So you want your cast on edge to be nice, and you know, you want your stitches to have about the same amount of tension on them. I'm a thrower, so I'm going to show you English style. A lot of people knit continental, and continental is when you hold your yarn with your left hand once we get it casted on. Okay, cast on and a long tail is usually always this way. This is how I've seen it done. Okay, so once again, under, over, through, okay, under, over, through. All right, and rewind this as much as you need and cast on 40 stitches, and pause your video, cast on 40, and meet me back. So I've casted on 40 stitches right here. Okay, it should look something like this. And I'm going to push these stitches up onto this needle. You want to make sure they are not twisted, so you want all of the loops to be on the outside and your yarn tail to be over here on the right. See, I did the 7 stitches, and that was about the right length of yarn, but I know that because of I've done this a lot. So if you're not sure, go ahead and do 10. It's better to have too much of a tail than not enough. So now that we have 40 stitches casted on, we're going to cast on one more, okay? So cast on one more stitch, which is going to make 41 total, and I'll show you why. Now we have our stitches on our needles, but we have to join this so that we're now working in the round. And the best way that I have found to do this, and there are different ways, we're going to take this right hand needle, we're going to slip this stitch from our left hand needle and pull it over to this one. That's all we're doing. Slipping it from one needle to the other. Make sure your other ones don't come off, okay? All right, now we want to take this stitch, this last one that we casted on, and we're going to lift it. This is so hard to do on camera. Lift it over this stitch, and you should be able to do it because it's fairly loose. Okay, and you can push these stitches up if you need to. All right, and we're going to just drop that stitch off. Okay, so, and now we're going to tighten it up. See how that stitch, we just dropped it off? So we added a stitch, but we ended up dropping it off, okay? So now we're back to having 40 stitches. Now, since my tail is now here, because I had put this stitch on here, I'm going to put this stitch back on my left hand needle, okay? There we go. Now, push these down so they don't come off. I have my tail right here, which should be the beginning of your start. You're going to have to hold this for the first stitch because it's not going to be tight. So you need to grab this with your fingers and just hold it just until you get your first knit stitch done, okay? All right, you're going to need a stitch marker. This is where these come in handy. If you don't have these, you can just I just take a piece of worsted weight yarn and just make a slip knot, like so. Okay, so you can move it. And then you can just simply put your slip knot on here and you can tighten it up. Some people use their rings. If you want to use your ring, you can use your ring on the bigger needles. I'm going to use my stitch marker. Okay, now the fun part starts. So we have our join. We need to hold with one of our hands. I'm going to hold it with my left hand here. I am a thrower, so that means I hold my yarn in my right hand. So your yarn should always be coming, if you're doing this your yarn should always be coming from your right hand needle, okay? So the way I do it, and everybody's different, you will find the way that works for you. I tension it around my little pinky, and then I come back around my first finger like this, okay? That's what it looks like. Once again, pull it with my little pinky, And you may want to go around twice. It just depends on if you're able to tension it. Some people just hold it and don't even wrap it around their pinky. But you need to make sure that you don't have a lot of slack here. Oops. Okay, that this is nice and taut from your finger. You want it to come around this way so that you can throw this way. All right. So for our first stitch, it's the first stitch on our left-hand needle here. So I'm holding my tail here. You're going to take this needle, your right needle, and you're going to go in from front to back, like so. And you're going to pull the yarn, wrap it around the needle. Okay. Pull this through, and then move that stitch off of that needle. Okay. Again, this is called knitwise. So you're going in from front to back, right there, wrapping around the needle, pulling that stitch through and off your needle. Your first row is going to be tight, and you're going to think, ugh. But once you get your first row, it's going to be a lot different. It's just this first row that ends up being tight. So you're going to go in knitwise, come around, pull that yarn through, and push that stitch off. See, these are your knit stitches. Okay, once again, you can use that little wheel down there in the corner. Front to back, around the needle, and push that stitch off. And you're knitting. Okay, I'm going to do some in real time. You can slow this down. And as you work, you are going to have to slide the stitches on your left-hand needle up as you work. Okay. And these down. So these get pushed up and these get pushed down. All right, pause your video, rewind as many times as you need to, and knit this entire first row. All right, once you get to your last stitch, you need to move your stitch marker from here over to here again. So usually I make these a knit one, purl one, but since I'm doing this as a tutorial, I thought we'd get used to doing the knit stitch. So we're going to do a garter ridge, which is one whole row of knit, one row of purl, then we'll go into a rib stitch. That way it'll give you time to practice your knits and your purls. Okay, so now we have our yarn and we have our needles. We're going to do the purl stitch all the way around. So on the knit stitch, you're always holding your yarn to the back. So in other words, when you knit, your yarn is always in the back of the stitch. In the purl, we're now bringing the yarn to the front, okay? And now we're going to go, instead of going this direction, we're going from back to front. Oops. All right, and then wrapping the yarn around this way. Okay. Oops. And then pushing that through and pulling that stitch off. Okay, so your yarn remains in the front. Okay, going from back to front, around the needle. You got to hold tension with this finger, push it through and pull that stitch off. Okay, see your little purl bumps right here? So see, these are your knit stitches, and these are your little purl bumps. Really, really easy to see in needle knitting. All right, back to front, around the stitch, push it through and off. Okay, again, into the stitch, around the needle, and push it off. And you can slow this down as much as you need to. With your little gear settings on YouTube. All right, so see all your little cool little pearl bumps? Isn't that pretty? And super, super neat and easy. Okay, so through here and around and through. All right, so pause your video, back it up, rewind it, and I want you to purl 40 stitches and meet me back here when you get to your stitch marker. Okay, I did my last purl stitch. I'm going to take my stitch marker, move it over, and I'm going to move my yarn back to the back of my work. All right, now this looks loose, but it will be okay, I promise. It just looks that way in knitting. All right, so now that we did one whole row of knit, one whole row of purl, which gives you that, see that nice garter ridge? Isn't that pretty? We're going to do a rib stitch. So those of you that have loom knitted before, that's one knit and one purl. The biggest thing that I struggled with when I was learning to knit is remembering where my yarn needed to be. I would invariably purl with the yarn in back or knit with the yarn in front or something. So this time we're going to do one knit, one purl. Okay, so we have the yarn at the back of the work. I'm going to go in from front to back, and we're going to knit one. Then we're going to bring the yarn back to the front, and we're going to purl the next stitch. Okay. Then you got to bring the yarn back to the back. Remember, you can slow this down if you need to. And we're going to go into the front of the stitch. Come around, do the knit stitch, bring your yarn back to the front for your purl stitch. Okay, so we're going to repeat that. So we got a knit, purl, oops, knit, purl, see my purl bump here. Okay, I'm going to keep doing a few more of these. Okay, so we want to go to the back of the work. Knit, come back to the front, and do your purl stitch. So remember, your yarn has to always be in the front for the purl stitch. The crazy turkeys are walking past my window. We have about 100 wild turkeys out here. It's crazy. I'm standing here in front of my window. And they're all walking around up on the hill out there. See how much stretchier your stitches are the next, once you get a couple of rounds. Knit, so knit, purl bump, knit, purl bump, knit, purl bump. So you can see those little purl bumps. So you can easily distinguish which stitch is which. All right, so we're going to do a rib stitch of one knit, one purl. I would do about 5 rows. Let's do 5 rows and come back and see how much length we have right here. Okay, so pause your video, rewind it if you need to. One knit, one purl for 5 rows and meet me back. I'll show you these crazy turkeys out here. Let's see if you can see them. I'll zoom in. See my turkeys out there? There's a whole bunch of them. And then up here on the hill, see them walking up there? I just thought I'd add this in the video. It makes it kind of fun. All right, so meet me back after you finish your ribbing. All right, I have finished 5 rows of the ribbing, and I think that's going to be really nice, nice width. And so what I want to do is put a garter ridge on top. So now that we're done with our ribbing, we're going to do 1 complete row of knit and 1 row of purl, okay? And that will put a garter ridge on the top. So, so we're going to knit all the way around. All right, 1 entire row, and then we're going to purl 1 entire row. And then we'll switch our colors and switch our yarn and start with the body of the hat, which is just going to be knit. It's really simple. So finish up your row of knit, meet me back at the stitch marker, and we'll do our purls. Okay, I finished my row of knit and I'm back at my stitch marker. So remember, you want to bring your yarn back around to the front. And in this one, we're going to purl every stitch. Okay, so we're just going to purl every stitch. See how much easier it is once you get that first row done, then your stitches are not nearly as difficult to work with. Okay, so I'm going to purl this round all the way around to your stitch marker and meet me back. Okay, so I think this looks really nice. Start out with a garter ridge, do your rib stitch, and end with a garter ridge. You can do all different kinds of brims. This one is actually a broken rib stitch, which means it's one row of knit, then knit one, purl one, then a row of knit, knit one, purl one, and so forth. And then I put a garter ridge on top of there. And I think this one, I think I did a garter ridge on the bottom of that as well. No, I guess I just did a regular one, and I just did a garter ridge on top. Anyway, okay, so now we get to the end of this. We want to cut a tail. I leave a pretty long tail. The reason why is I like to have enough to thread through my needle so that you have, you know, something like this so you can weave it through and you're not fighting this pulling out of your needle. So now we're going to take our second yarn, our country loom, and I wind all my yarn into cakes like this with my yarn winder, and I have a video on my yarn winder as well. I have a Stanwood, and it's wonderful because, as some of you know, when you've bought yarn, there will be places occasionally. I've never had this at all with Country Loom or Hometown USA. Some yarns you'll get and you can see where the machine cut it and tied it. And when you wind your yarn, if you have places like that, you know in advance and it doesn't happen in the middle of a project. So, okay. So I have my handy little stoppers on here to keep my work from falling off. Okay. All right, so I'm going to get my working yarn here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have to hold this tail. You don't want to pull it super tight, but you don't want it to be too loose. All right. So we're going to knit all these stitches. So we're putting our needle in from front to back first, holding this tail. Now I'm going to once again leave a long tail here, and I'm going to just place this yarn over the top. Okay, and all I'm going to do is pull it through that stitch, pull that stitch off. Okay, so now when you turn it over on the back, what I like to do is just don't tie it in a knot, but just until you can have time to weave the tails in, I just barely pull it to like that so that I'm not fussing with it so much. Okay, so now we have this yarn right here. So you got to make sure sure to pull this a little bit tight. Okay. All right, so you just keep knitting every stitch from here on out with the new yarn, just like we did before. Okay. Sorry, I got my project turned inside out. So make sure that your outside of your project is on the outside of your needles. I had it flipped the other way. I wonder, I kept thinking that's not right. Okay, so see how I've just kind of tied this a little bit, just very loosely. I'm not going to put it in a knot or anything. And we can deal with those tails later in our project. Okay, so now I'm back doing this right. Sorry about that. All right, so we're going to just keep knitting, and we're going to knit every stitch. And for this hat, it depends on how much length you want. The bind off is going to be about, hold on, I'll tell you. Okay, so I make all my hats right about 8 inches. The bind off on this one was a couple of inches, I believe. So I usually leave you're going to have to leave a couple of inches for the bind off. So I'm going to knit about 6.5 inches, and then we'll be ready to do the bind off. And the bind off will be 1.5 inches to 2 inches, giving you a final height of about 8 inches. Okay, so just keep knitting every stitch in your secondary yarn until you get, and 6.5 is total, okay, including the brim. So your measurement's going to start from the bottom of the brim all the way to the top. Don't knit 6.5 in this, your hat will be ridiculously long. So 6.5 including the brim, okay, and then do that, and then meet me back and we will begin our bind off. So I have knit actually a little more than 6.5, but that's fine. If it's a little bit longer, it's okay. I have knit about 7 inches. So I'm going to start my bind off, because the bind off is going to be 2, 4, 6, 8 rows. So there are various bind offs you can do in knitting. I'm going to use the standard knit 2 together to keep it simple. When you're knitting, this is why it's important to figure out what your cast on number is. You need to be able to have it divisible by some number so that you can do your bind off. If it's not divisible by anything, then you can't do your knit 2 togethers. So I'm going to use 10 stitches as my starting point. So 10 goes into 44 times. So I'm going to knit 3 stitches, and then I'm going to knit 2 together all the way around. And when I get done, I will have 36 stitches. So see, 10 goes into 44 times, so you'll have 4 less stitches each round. Okay, then you'll do knit, so we'll do knit 8, knit 2 together. So this is 8, 9, 10 stitches. Then you'll do knit 7, knit 2 together, knit 6, knit 2 together, and so forth. Okay, till you get down to about 8 stitches. I'm going to stay on my circulars. Like I mentioned, I stay on them as long as I can. Okay, so we're going to do knit 8, knit 2 together. Okay, so I'm just going to knit 8 stitches and then knit 2 together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I'm going to knit 2 stitches together. So it is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to go into the front. See these 2 stitches? There's 1, 2 stitches to the front of this one and to the front of that one, where they're both held together. And go around once and knit them together. Okay, so let's do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then knit 2 together. So there's 1 there. To get my needles in between there, and knit those 2 together. Okay, and you're going to continue to do that around until you get back to your stitch marker. Knit 8, knit 2 together. All right, so now on the next row, we're going to knit 7. So now we have 36 stitches. We're going to knit 7, knit 2 together. At the end of that, we'll have 32 stitches. Okay, we're just going to do the same thing. All right, just going to knit 7 stitches. All right, I just finished that round of the knit 7, knit 2 together. So the next round will be at knit 6, knit 2 together. So you're just going to keep going like that for every single round. The link to this pattern is in the description below. Keep that around until you get back to your stitch marker. Okay, when your stitches start getting tight, you can pull the cord through like this to push your stitches up onto your needle, like so. Okay, and then you can still knit like that. 2, 3, oops, 4, 5, 6, and knit these last 2 together. Oops. Okay. Now, stitches are getting a little tight, so I'm going to use this little trick here. I'm going to stay on my circulars. Pulling the cord out like so. Okay, so we finished that round. So our next round, we're just going to keep on going. We'll be a knit 5, knit 2 together. Okay. My cord through, pushing my stitches up till I get all the way around. So we just finished the knit 5, knit 2 together. We have 24 stitches left. It's getting a little bit tight, so I'm going to go to my DPNs, my double pointed needles. So I have 24 stitches, so 4 times 6 is 24. Actually, let's see. So I have 24 stitches, and the next row will be knit 4, knit 2 together, where we will have just 20 stitches left. So these are actually 11s, one size smaller than the 13s, and they work really well. Okay. All right, so my working yarn is coming from here. This would be my last stitch, because this would be the one, if I was still going in the round, right, this would be the one that I'm going to start knitting with. So I'm going to grab my working yarn just like I did before. This time I'm taking my double pointed needle and I'm using this to do my knitting with. Okay, it's just an empty needle. So I'm going to go here. Here's my working yarn. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and my knit 2 togethers. Put these 2 stitches together. Okay. Actually, I'm going to do 1 for each needle, so that's the first one. Okay. So I'm going to leave those on that needle, and I'm going to get my next needle. Okay, so I've got another empty needle here, ready to go. Sorry, there's not a lot of light in here today. It's really snowy. Turn this lamp here, and dark out today. All right, we're just going to leave this here, and this is just going to kind of dangle here, and it's kind of a pain to try to knit with DPNs because they all seem to get in the way. And I think you can buy, I think these are 7-inch, and I know they make 5-inch. I would really like to get the 5 inches, but I haven't seen them readily in the store, so I probably would have to order them online. Okay, here we go again. I'm going in here, and this is my working yarn. Alright, you just have to fuss with them. Okay, get the first stitch in here. Make sure it's around that needle. 1, 2, 3, 4. You just have to work around the other needle and knit 2 together. Oops. Okay. And I'm going to leave that one be. And I'm going to get another empty one. Okay. Knit these 1, 2, 3, 4. I need one more stitch on here. So I'm going to scooch these up. Okay. All right, here we go. 1. I'm clumsy working with DPNs. 2, 3, 4, and then these 2 together. All right. So now I have 3 needles here, and I should just have 6 stitches left that I'm going to make into 5. There we go. There's 1, and this is going to get harder and harder. Oop. 2. 3. Cannot even imagine knitting a whole hat like this. I'm sure I'm not doing it the best way, but 4. Oops. And knit 2 together. Well, that didn't work. Let's try that again. Okay. This is where my yarn marker comes in handy because I still want to mark the beginning so that I know when I get back there. Okay. The end. All right, so this was the last one because this is where my tail is. So I'm marking that with my yarn marker. Now, so we just got through with knit 4, knit 2 together. We're going to do knit 3, knit 2 together. So now I have one more double pointed needle because they come in sets of 5. I have 4 here on my hat, and this will be the 5th one. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did. Now I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 3. Knit 2 together. This gets trickier and trickier. I'm sure there's a knitter, experienced knitter looking at this going, she's making it really harder than it has to be, and I probably am. Okay, so now I have this one free. So then I'm just going to go to the next one and do the same thing. Okay, knit 3, knit 2 together. One, 2, 3, and then knit these 2 together. It's really hard to do on camera. It's hard to do off camera. It's harder to do on camera. Knit 2 together. Those are going to have to come off because they're getting tight. Okay, so you're just going to do that till you get back around to your stitch marker. Okay, we have 16 stitches left, 4 on each of our 4 needles, and I'm going to go ahead and do a knit 2 together, ending with 12 stitches. So we're going to do the same thing. Come around here, I'll put my stitch marker there, and I'm just going to knit 2 stitches and knit 2 together all the way around. Oops. One. Oh, these yarn fibers are getting caught up. It's the only thing with this fuzzy yarn. Not as bad as homespun, but it's still fuzzy. 1, 2, and then knit these 2 together, because you only have 4 on your needles. Let's see, I just dropped those off by accident. Didn't mean to do that. All right, I was able to push those back onto my needle and knit that stitch. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. I've cut my yarn. I left myself a nice long tail. And I have 12 stitches left, and that's fine. It won't be real bulky or anything. So here's where my working yarn is coming from, right here. So all I'm going to do is take my needle through each stitch and just pull each one off the needles. Oops, I'm sorry. So just make sure you get it through the stitch. Okay. And just keep going around, taking each stitch off. There's one last stitch. And then all you have to do is pull it tight, close up your hat, and of course your thread will go down underneath. And all you do is just weave in your tail as best you can in these stitches around the top. Okay. And that's all you do. And I'm going to weave these tails in. I still have to weave these in. And then you have a nice cozy beanie. Super simple, super fast, super easy.